As you can see, I'm here on the Mount of Olives, and I'm looking for cracks that you can see actually here in the road over here. You can see that there's cracks that are starting to crack.
What if I told you that under one of the holiest places on earth, there's a giant crack that could split open at any time? The Mount of Olives in Jerusalem sits on a fault line discovered in 1964, and many believe it's tied to ancient prophecies. Stick around, because what you're about to hear might completely change how you see history, faith, and the future. The mysterious discovery. It's 1964 in Jerusalem, and King Hussein of Jordan decides to build a magnificent hotel on top of the Mount of Olives. Everything seems perfect until the construction crews start digging. What they found completely changed how we look at this sacred mountain forever. Engineers discovered something absolutely mind-blowing: a massive geological fault line running right through the middle of the Mount of Olives, stretching from east to west. Not any small crack in the rock. We're talking about a significant geological feature that had been hiding beneath this holy mountain for who knows how long. The discovery was so dramatic that they had to completely relocate the entire hotel project. That hotel still stands today, by the way. It's called the Seven Arches Hotel, and it serves as a permanent reminder of what lies beneath this sacred ground. But here's where things get really interesting. This fault line cuts through the Mount of Olives in the exact direction that an ancient biblical prophecy described, thousands of years before anyone knew about geological fault lines. The ancient prophecy that predicted it all. The book of Zechariah, written around 520 BC, contains a prophecy that seems almost impossible to believe. Zechariah 14:4 states,
In Zechariah 14, it tells you where exactly and what it looks like when Jesus comes back.
On that day, his feet shall stand on the Mount of Olives that lies before Jerusalem on the east, and the Mount of Olives shall be split in two from east to west by a very wide valley, so that one half of the mount shall move northward, and the other half southward. Think about this for a moment. We're talking about a prophecy that was written over 2,500 years ago, long before modern geology existed. Ancient people had no understanding of tectonic plates, fault lines, or seismic activity. Yet this prophecy describes exactly what could happen if a major earthquake hit the fault line that was discovered in 1964. The specificity is absolutely stunning. The prophecy describes it as a precise split from east to west, creating a valley, with one half moving north and the other south. That's exactly how geological fault lines work when they experience major seismic activity. What makes this even more remarkable is that the Mount of Olives holds incredible significance in the Christian faith. This is where Jesus often prayed, where he wept over Jerusalem, and according to the Bible, where he ascended to heaven. The prophecy suggests this same location will play a crucial role in future events. The geological reality. Now let's talk science. The Mount of Olives is part of the much larger Great Rift Valley system that stretches for thousands of miles through Africa and the Middle East. This is one of the most seismically active regions on our planet. Geologists tell us that Israel has been building up tremendous seismic pressure for years. The area is absolutely ripe for significant earthquake activity. When you combine this with the discovery of that east-west fault line running directly through the Mount of Olives, you start to realize we're looking at a geological powder keg. The Great Rift Valley is actively spreading, creating ongoing tension in the Earth's crust throughout this region. Southern portions thousands of miles away are already experiencing active spreading, and this pressure has to be released somewhere. The Mount of Olives, sitting right on this fault system, could be exactly where that release happens. What's particularly fascinating is how this geological reality aligns perfectly with the ancient prophecy. Modern science has confirmed that the conditions exist for exactly the type of catastrophic splitting that Zechariah described over 2 millennia ago. Signs and patterns in recent times. Here's where things get really intriguing for those watching for prophetic signs. Some researchers and believers have been documenting what they see as increasing activity and unusual occurrences around the Mount of Olives and surrounding areas. Historical earthquake patterns in the Middle East show that the region experiences major seismic events in cycles. According to some geological studies, the area might be overdue for a significant earthquake. The best seismologists in the world can't predict exactly when the next big earthquake will hit, but the geological evidence suggests the pressure has been building for a considerable time. The Mount of Olives has been a focal point for religious pilgrimage and study for centuries, and many visitors and researchers report a sense of anticipation, as if something significant is building beneath this sacred ground. While this might be subjective, the combination of geological facts and prophetic expectations creates an atmosphere of expectancy that's hard to ignore. What's particularly interesting is how various global events and regional tensions seem to be converging around Jerusalem and its surroundings. Whether you view this through a religious lens or a purely geological one, the Mount of Olives remains at the center of attention. Different perspectives on the prophecy. Not everyone interprets these connections the same way, and that's what makes this topic so fascinating to explore. Some people see the 1964 fault line discovery as definitive proof that ancient prophecies are scientifically accurate and that we should expect literal fulfillment of these predictions. Others approach it from a purely geological standpoint, viewing the fault line as simply a natural feature that happens to align with ancient religious texts. They argue that earthquake activity in this region is inevitable due to natural geological processes, regardless of any prophetic significance. Then, there are those who see the prophecy as symbolic, rather than literal. They interpret the splitting of the Mount of Olives as representing spiritual or metaphorical changes, rather than a physical, geological event.
Jerusalem, as well as the Old City. We're going to take a little tour here on the Mount of Olives, talk about some scripture and why this place was so special for Yeshua.
From this perspective, the fault line discovery is interesting, but not necessarily prophetically significant. Religious scholars have debated for centuries whether Zechariah's prophecy should be understood literally or figuratively. The discovery of the fault line has certainly added fuel to the literal interpretation side of this debate, but it hasn't settled the question definitively. What's undeniable is that the convergence of ancient prophecy and modern geological discovery creates a compelling case study in how religious texts and scientific findings can intersect in unexpected ways. The broader context. To really understand the significance of the Mount of Olives situation, we need to look at the bigger picture of what's happening in this region. Jerusalem sits at the crossroads of three major tectonic plates, making it one of the most geologically complex areas on Earth. The entire Dead Sea Transform fault system, which includes the fault line under the Mount of Olives, stretches for over 600 miles. This massive geological feature connects the spreading centers in the Red Sea to the collision zones in Turkey. The Mount of Olives sits right in the middle of this incredibly active system. Historical records show that major earthquakes in this region often coincide with significant historical and cultural shifts. Whether that's pure coincidence or something more meaningful depends entirely on your perspective and beliefs. The region's geological instability isn't limited to just the Mount of Olives. The entire area around Jerusalem experiences regular seismic activity, though most of it is relatively minor. However, the potential for a major earthquake remains very real from a purely scientific standpoint. Scientists continue to monitor seismic activity throughout the region using modern technology that wasn't available when the fault line was first discovered in 1964. This ongoing research provides valuable data about the likelihood and timing of future seismic events. What experts are saying. Geological experts who study this region are fascinated by the unique characteristics of the Mount of Olives fault line. Unlike many fault systems that run north-south, this particular fault cuts east-west, which is relatively unusual for this part of the world. The precision of the fault line's direction, running almost exactly from east to west as described in the ancient prophecy, continues to intrigue both scientists and religious scholars. Some researchers have calculated that the statistical probability of this alignment being a pure coincidence is remarkably low. Seismologists studying the region note that the geological pressure building along the fault system could result in exactly the type of splitting described in Zechariah. When major earthquakes occur along fault lines, it's not uncommon for one side to shift significantly relative to the other, creating valleys and dramatic changes in the landscape. Archaeological experts who work in the area have also contributed valuable insights about the historical significance of the Mount of Olives and how its geological features might have influenced ancient prophecies and religious practices. The ongoing research continues to reveal new details about both the geological characteristics of the fault line and the historical context of the prophecies associated with it. The timeline question. One of the most common questions people ask about this topic is, when might this actually happen? From a geological perspective, earthquake prediction remains one of the most challenging areas of earth science. Even with all our modern technology and understanding, scientists cannot accurately predict when specific earthquakes will occur. What we do know is that geological processes operate on timescales that are often much longer than human lifespans. The pressure that's building along fault lines can take decades or even centuries to reach critical levels. However, when it does release, the results can be dramatic and sudden. Historical earthquake records for the region show patterns of major seismic events occurring every few hundred years, but these patterns aren't precise enough to make accurate predictions. The 1964 discovery of the fault line provides a crucial piece of the geological puzzle, but it doesn't give us a timeline for when significant activity might occur. From a religious perspective, prophecy interpretation varies widely. Some believe we're living in times that match prophetic descriptions and expect fulfillment soon. Others view these prophecies as referring to events in the distant future or as symbolic rather than literal. The fascinating thing is that both geological science and religious prophecy acknowledge the potential for dramatic changes at the Mount of Olives, even though they approach the question from completely different perspectives. We are talking about an interval of every 400 years. If we follow the patterns of nature, a major quake should be expected any time because almost a whole millennium has passed since the last strong earthquake of 1033. The ongoing mystery. What makes the Mount of Olives situation so captivating is how it combines ancient wisdom with modern discovery in ways that continue to surprise researchers and believers alike. The 1964 fault line discovery remains one of the most remarkable examples of archaeological and geological findings aligning with ancient religious texts. Visitors to the Mount of Olives today can see markers and geological surveys that document the fault line's location. The Seven Arches Hotel stands as a permanent reminder of the discovery that changed how we understand this sacred location. Ongoing geological monitoring continues to track seismic activity in the region. While most of the recorded activity has been relatively minor, the potential for major events remains a subject of serious scientific study.
Here on the Mount of Olives, and I'm looking for cracks that you can see actually here in the flooring if you look at
The Mount of Olives continues to be one of the most visited religious sites in the world, attracting millions of pilgrims, tourists, and researchers every year. Many visitors report feeling a sense of awe when they learn about the fault line running beneath their feet. Whether you approach this topic from a religious, geological, or historical perspective, the Mount of Olives represents a unique intersection of faith, science, and prophecy that continues to generate discussion and debate. What this means for us today. Regardless of your personal beliefs about prophecy or religion, the Mount of Olives situation raises fascinating questions about the relationship between ancient texts and modern scientific discovery. How do we interpret remarkable alignments between prophecies written thousands of years ago and geological features discovered using modern technology? The discovery of the fault line has certainly strengthened the faith of many believers who see it as a validation of biblical prophecy. At the same time, it's provided scientists with valuable data about seismic risks in one of the world's most historically significant regions. We use the records, written in churches and monasteries or by hermits in the desert, to find patterns. For those interested in archaeology and history, the Mount of Olives continues to yield new insights about ancient civilizations and their understanding of the natural world. The precision of the prophetic description suggests that ancient peoples may have had more sophisticated knowledge about geological processes than we previously thought. The ongoing monitoring and research at the Mount of Olives contribute to our broader understanding of earthquake risks throughout the Middle East. This scientific knowledge has practical applications for building safety, emergency preparedness, and regional development planning. Perhaps most importantly, the Mount of Olives story reminds us that there are still mysteries in our world that bridge the gap between ancient wisdom and modern science. Modern technology and monitoring. With today's advanced seismic monitoring technology, scientists can track even the smallest movements along the Mount of Olives fault line in real time. Sophisticated instruments measure ground displacement, seismic waves, and stress changes that would have been completely invisible to researchers back in 1964. The Israel Seismic Network maintains multiple monitoring stations throughout the region, creating a detailed picture of geological activity. These high-tech sensors can detect micro-earthquakes and subtle ground movements that might signal increasing pressure along the fault system. Satellite technology has also revolutionized how we study this area. GPS measurements can track millimeter-level movements of the Earth's surface over time, providing crucial data about how the fault line is behaving. Some researchers have noted gradual changes in ground elevation around the Mount of Olives that could indicate ongoing geological processes. Ground-penetrating radar and other advanced imaging techniques have revealed more details about the fault line's structure and depth. These technologies show us that the fault extends much deeper than originally thought, making it potentially more significant than early researchers realized. The combination of traditional geological surveys with modern monitoring technology gives us an unprecedented view of what's happening beneath this sacred mountain. Every tremor, every shift, every change is now being carefully documented and analyzed. Global earthquake patterns and connections. The Mount of Olives sits within a much larger global network of seismic activity that connects earthquake zones across multiple continents. Understanding these broader patterns helps scientists assess the likelihood of major events in the Jerusalem area. Recent major earthquakes around the world have demonstrated how seismic pressure can transfer along connected fault systems.
The bedrock of Jerusalem will be split, and just over this way we're told by the prophet that there's going to be such a gigantic earthquake and will split in two.
When one part of a fault network releases pressure, it can increase stress on other sections hundreds or even thousands of miles away. The Mediterranean region as a whole has been experiencing increased seismic activity in recent decades. Major earthquakes in Turkey, Greece, and Italy are all part of the same broader tectonic system that includes the Middle East. This regional context makes the Mount of Olives fault line even more significant. Climate change has also introduced new variables into earthquake research. Some studies suggest that changes in groundwater levels and atmospheric pressure could influence seismic activity, though this remains an area of ongoing scientific investigation. International cooperation between seismologists has created a global early warning network that could potentially provide advance notice of major seismic events. The Mount of Olives is now part of this worldwide monitoring system, connecting ancient Jerusalem to modern global science. The engineering challenges. Building in an area with known fault lines presents unique engineering challenges, and the Mount of Olives has become a case study in seismic-resistant construction. The experience from the 1964 hotel construction has influenced building codes throughout the Jerusalem area. Modern buildings near the Mount of Olives must be designed to withstand significant ground movement. Engineers use special foundation techniques, flexible joints, and reinforced structures to ensure buildings can survive potential seismic events. The ancient buildings and religious structures on the Mount of Olives face particular challenges. Many of these historic structures were built long before modern seismic engineering was developed, making them potentially vulnerable to earthquake damage. Preservation efforts for archaeological sites around the Mount of Olives must balance historical authenticity with seismic safety. Engineers work closely with archaeologists to develop protection strategies that don't compromise the historical integrity of ancient structures. Infrastructure planning for water, power, and transportation systems in the area must also account for potential seismic activity. The fault line discovery has influenced decades of urban planning decisions throughout Jerusalem. Cultural and religious impact. The discovery of the fault line has had profound impacts on religious communities worldwide. For many believers, it serves as powerful evidence supporting the accuracy and relevance of ancient prophecies in modern times. Pilgrimage patterns to the Mount of Olives have been influenced by awareness of the fault line. Some visitors come specifically to see this convergence of prophecy and geology, while others find their religious experience deepened by understanding the geological context. Religious scholars have incorporated geological findings into their teachings and interpretations. The fault line discovery has sparked new theological discussions about the relationship between natural phenomena and divine prophecy. Different religious traditions have interpreted the geological findings through their own theological frameworks. Jewish, Christian, and Islamic perspectives on the Mount of Olives each bring unique insights to understanding the significance of the fault line. The ongoing dialogue between religious communities and scientific researchers has created new opportunities for interdisciplinary understanding. The Mount of Olives has become a symbol of how faith and science can inform and enrich each other. So, the remarkable story of how a simple hotel construction project in 1964 uncovered one of the most intriguing geological mysteries of our time, perfectly aligning with a 2,500-year-old prophecy that seems to predict exactly what modern science has revealed beneath the Mount of Olives. From ancient texts to the latest seismic monitoring, from archaeological discoveries to engineering challenges, this sacred mountain continues to bridge the gap between faith and science in ways that captivate researchers, believers, and curious minds around the world. Whether you see this as divine prophecy waiting for fulfillment, remarkable coincidence, or something entirely different, the Mount of Olives remains one of our planet's most fascinating intersections of geological reality and ancient wisdom. What's your take on this incredible alignment between ancient prophecy and modern geological discovery? Drop your thoughts in the comments below.